Aiboan, Vanakkam, Assalamu alaikum, and very good morning. All of you are warmly welcome to the National Conference on Library and Information Science 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Asiri Vijayasekara.
I'm Nadika Ratnabahu. Lighting oil lamp is our cultural tradition, even though in this virtual platform. I invite our distinguished dignitaries to lighting up virtual oil lamp.
Associate Professor, University of Denver, USA. Mr. W. Sunil, Director General, National Library and Documentation Service Board. Dr. Mrs. NACLIS Ravira, Head of the Department, Department of Library and Information Science, University of Kelaniya. Dr. Chammika Malavaratchi, President, University Librarians Association of Sri Lanka. Dr. Wan Bhage, President, Sri Lanka Library Association. Dr. Mrs. K.R.N. Harshani, General Secretary, Sri Lanka Library Association.
Ms. Padma Bandaranayaka, Director, National Library and Documentation Center. Dr. Deepan, Senior Assistant Librarian, Uva University. Mr. S. Santarupan, Senior Assistant Librarian, Eastern University, Sri Lanka. Mr. Dinesh Kulatunga, President, Read Plus Foundation. Dr. Taranga Ranasinghe, Conference Chair, NACLIS 2021. Dr. Mrs. M.M. Mashrufa, Conference Secretary, NACLIS 2021. Ms. W.G.W.D. Dharmatilaka, Paper Presenter. And Mr. C.A.B. Vikramasinghe, Participant.
Thank you for lighting up the occasion. Let us move to our welcome speech.
We are honored to have the presence of many national and international dignitaries joining at this National Conference on Library and Information Science. To formally welcome all of you on behalf of the Sri Lanka Library Association, I cordially invite the conference chair, Dr. W.M.T.D. Ranasinghe. Virtual screen is yours.
Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Taranga Ranasinghe. As the conference chair, it is my privilege and pleasure to welcome you all here today. The National Conference on Library and Information Science, popularly known as NACLIS, is the major annual academic event in Sri Lanka on library and information sciences. Organized by the Sri Lanka Library Association, NACLIS was started almost 16 years ago, in a time where the internet was just a luxury for many people. However, it is interesting to note that today we conduct the 16th edition of NACLIS as a fully virtual event. This year, our theme is Moving Towards Sustainability Through Library Transformation, which is aligned with United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. This year's conference is divided into two technical sessions, and we have 12 carefully selected research presentations there. Most significantly, papers are presented in all three languages widely used across Sri Lanka by making this conference a truly national event. First of all, I would like to warmly welcome our esteemed chief guest, Professor Nilanthi De Silva, Vice Chancellor of the University of Kelaniya, Sri Lanka, who will address the gathering in a short while from now. Madam, we are truly delighted to welcome you here today. Then, I would like to extend our warmest welcome to our distinguished keynote speaker, Dr. Christina K. Matusik, Associate Professor from the University of Denver in the United States. Madam, I'm sure our audience is eagerly waiting to listen to your interesting keynote address. Next, I would like to warmly welcome our special invitees for today's inaugural session. Mr. W. Sunil, Director General of the National Library and Documentation Services Board. Dr. Mrs. Namali Suravira, Head of the Department of Library and Information Science, University of Kelaniya. Dr. Chammika Mallavarachchi, President, University Librarians Association of Sri Lanka, for joining with us today on our invitation in this virtual inauguration ceremony. Now, I warmly welcome our session chairs, Mrs. Padma Bandaranayake, Dr. T. Pradeepan, and Mr. Santharuban, as well as our main sponsors, Mr. Dinesh Kulatunga, the chairman of Read Plus Foundation, for joining with us today on our invitation in this virtual inauguration ceremony. Then, I cordially welcome the President, General Secretary, Council members, as well as all other members of Sri Lanka Library Association to this inaugural session of NACLIS 2021. Finally, I am delighted to welcome all the participants and presenters to this inauguration ceremony. I wish everyone a successful and fruitful conference. Before I hand over to Ms. Nadika and Mr. Asiri, our compeers for today, I want to say once more, on behalf of the organizing committee, welcome. It's wonderful to see all of you here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ranasinghe. It is time to hearing from our dignitaries. To welcome our chief guest and read out the citation, I would like to invite Dr. Uday Cabral, Assistant Director, National Library and Documentation Services Board, to spotlight. Over to you, Dr. Uday Cabral.
I think there had been a very slight modification in the program. May I speak now? Ms. Radhika, you are muted. Ms. Radhika, you are muted.
Yes, okay. For this, we need to do some small clarification. The screen is yours, Asri.
Let us move to the next segment to address the gathering. We cordially invite the President, Sri Lanka Library Association. Please welcome Dr. Ruan Gamage. Virtual screen is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Our chief guest, Senior Professor Nilantha De Silva, Madam Vice Chancellor, University of Kelaniya. Keynote speaker, Dr. Christina Marziak, Associate Professor, University of Denver, USA, and immediate past chair of the Library Theory and Research section of the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, IFLA. Mr. W. Sunil, Director General, National Library and Documentation Services Board. Dr. Chamika Mallavarachi, President, University Librarians Association of Sri Lanka. Session chairs, Dr. Mrs. Namali Suravira, Ms. Padma Bandarnayaka, Dr. T. Prathipan, and Mr. S. Santharupan. Our sponsors, Mr. Dinesh Kulatunga, Chairman, Read Plus Foundation. All librarians who are present in this August occasion. All distinguished invitees, Council and Executive Committee members of the Sri Lanka Library Association, all SLLA members, SLLA staff members, students, presenters, and dear participants. Last year, the Sri Lanka Library Association celebrated its 60th anniversary after establishment. And this year, we are celebrating the 60th anniversary of Library and Information Science Education in Sri Lanka, which was started by Sri Lanka Library Association, then called Ceylon Library Association in 1961. So coming to the NACLIS again. So this year, Dr. Tharanga Ranasinghe is leading this dedicated team of young professionals and academics towards making this event a success. So I congratulate him and his team for the diligent efforts over the past few months. Of course, this NACLIS event was rolling over the years by the efforts of numerous individuals and teams. So celebrations is one thing and moving ahead is another. We have to move forward and add to the good work that our ancestors, the past members have done. Of course, this NACLIS has a long history. It has passed several decades. In the beginning, it actually in the past so many decades, the conference had been there as the annual sessions along with the annual general meeting. So it is like in the 42nd AGM and annual sessions, 41st annual AGM and annual sessions, so on. So this 43rd annual sessions held in 2003, it was called NACLIS. Actually, it is the precursor of NACLIS. And I also attended that as a young academic, just like those who are going to present today. I also presented the paper there. So moving back to today's program, as the president of the Sri Lanka Library Association, I must thank Senior Professor Nilantha De Silva for accepting our invitation and gracing this event. I know as a university academic how you contributed to the quality assurance aspect of the university programs. We also have matched our SLLA professional education programs with these developments. In fact, the SLLA evaluated our diploma and higher diploma programs against the Sri Lanka qualification framework. We have already also worked closely with the Tertiary and Vocational Education Commission, TVEC, to develop a professional course curriculum for SLQF levels 3 and 4, or in terms of NVQ, levels 5 and 6, that we will be finalized in the near future. Finally, Dr. Christina Matusiak, thank you for accepting our invitation to be the keynote speaker. It's a privilege to have you as a member of the member and the past chair of the Library Theory and Research section of IFLA here today with us. We know that you are a good speaker in library research. Therefore, I propose today to conduct a training program to introduce new trends and vistas of library and information science research for the region. Madam, please consider that as an IFLA activity for the SAARC region, because it is in need. So without further delay, I invite all the participants to make the full use of today's inaugural and technical sessions, and also to contribute with your own knowledge for common learning during the technical sessions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ruan Gamage. Nadika, over to you. Nadika, you are muted.
Yes, Asiri, it is right time to hearing from our dignitaries. To welcome our chief guest and read out the citation, I would like to invite Dr. Uday Cabral, Assistant Director, National Library and Documentation Services Board, to a spotlight. Over to you, Dr. Uday Cabral.
Good morning, everybody. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor for me to introduce the chief guest of NACLIS 2021. It is indeed a privilege to have Professor Nilanthi De Silva, Vice Chancellor of the University of Kelaniya and Senior Professor of Parasitology in Faculty of Medicine, University of Kelaniya, as the chief guest of today's event. Before becoming Vice Chancellor in August 2020, she was the Director of Quality Assurance Council of the University Grant Commission. And before that, she served as the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine of University of Kelaniya from 2012 to 2018. Professor De Silva is a specialist in medical parasitology and has published more than 100 research papers in scientific journals. And she is an expert and advisor to the World Health Organization on medical parasitology and neglected tropical diseases. In 2020, she was among the world top 2% of research scientists in the list compiled by Stanford University, United States. Now I cordially invite our esteemed chief guest, Professor Nilanthi De Silva, to address the gathering.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. Cabral, for that kind introduction. You can hear me, right?
Yes,
Yes.
madam.
Yes, madam.
Right. Dr. Ruan Gamage, President of the Sri Lanka Library Association and other office bearers of the Sri Lanka Library Association. Dr. Matusiak, keynote speaker for this morning. It's probably evening for you, actually. Distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really deeply honored by the invitation extended to me by the Sri Lanka Library Association to be the chief guest at the inauguration of this annual National Conference on Library and Information Science for 2021. From my very young days as a school child and as a medical student, later on as a postgraduate student, a university teacher and a researcher, and now as the Vice Chancellor of one of the largest universities in Sri Lanka, I have always greatly appreciated and valued the many types of libraries that I have had the privilege to access. And I'm sure there are representatives in the gathering today of many of those libraries. And so it's really a great pleasure to join you this morning and to share a few thoughts that may be of interest to you. We live in an era where knowledge economy is seen as the best route to national development. Knowledge economies require a workforce that is well educated, a workforce that is not just able to read and write, not just barely literate, but one that is learning that has extended well beyond secondary school to tertiary education as well. At all levels of education, whether it's primary school or secondary school, university, or other institutes of higher education, students, teachers, and researchers need to access learning resources. And as repositories of knowledge and information, libraries are obviously vitally important in all of these educational institutions. A good library makes it possible to access all the learning resources that we need whenever we need it. And librarians, as the custodians of these resources, play a key role in molding our learning communities. I think the Sri Lanka Library Association is very cognizant of this responsibility, particularly judging from the choice of your theme for this conference, which is moving towards sustainability through library transformation. I grew up in an era where everything was paper-based, and a library was a place that had all kinds of books, journals, and magazines in hardcovers or in paperback in all shapes and sizes. There was nothing electronic at that time. The world is very different now, and digitalization has transformed virtually every aspect of our lives, including learning resources. And right now, when we are in the middle of a pandemic that has required all of us to engage in social distancing, electronic learning resources have become really, really crucially important. We have been forced to move from traditional face-to-face classrooms to a virtual learning environment. We have been forced to move our meetings and conferences like we have done today from physical venues to online platforms. Similarly, we have had to switch from using traditional physical learning resources to e-books and other learning materials, especially audio-visual materials that can be accessed virtually. I'm well aware that many libraries began this transformation some years ago, but the pandemic has catalyzed it into a very different kind of challenge that needs to be met urgently. I think when we face such existential challenges, we need to face them together, to learn from each other, and to share our mistakes as well as our best practices to figure out what works and what doesn't work. Most of the time, our problems are not unique to an individual or to an institution, and it really helps to know how others have coped when faced with similar situations. And this, I think, applies not just across institutions within a country, but institutions across national boundaries, across different regions of the world. In many ways, it doesn't really matter whether you're struggling with inadequate resources and lack of whatever in countries like ours, or in other situations where in developed countries the limitation on resources, on financial resources, is not so great. I'm sure that this annual conference will provide an excellent platform for sharing experiences with each other. And I know it will also provide a means of sharing the information that has been generated by those who are engaged in research in library and information sciences during the technical sessions that you talked about. And so I wish all those participating in this National Conference on Library and Information Science 2021 a very productive conference with fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Your words of encouragement would certainly motivate our members to do more and achieve more. Well, I'm really glad you joined our National Conference on Library and Information Science as a chief guest. Thank you for accepting our invitation and dedicated your precise time to us. Please accept this token of appreciation from the National Conference on Library and Information Science 2021, organized by the Sri Lanka Library Association. Thank you very much, madam.
Thank you.
You're welcome, madam.
We are indeed privileged to have a lot of highly distinguished personalities this conference. It's now time to listen such an esteemed keynote speech. To welcome our keynote speaker and read out the citation, I would like to invite Ms. Divya Janan, Senior Assistant Librarian, University of Jaffna. Over to you, Ms. Divya.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to everybody. I take this as a privilege to introduce our keynote speaker of the NACLIS 2021, Dr. Christina Matusek, Associate Professor in the Library and Information Science, University of Denver. Dr. Christina Matusek is an Associate Professor in the Library and Information Science program at the University of Denver in the United States. She received her master's in the Library and Information Science and PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She has been involved in the digitization of archival and the special collection material for 20 years. Prior to accept her position at the University of Denver, she was the head of the digitization unit at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She also served as a digitization consultant for the projects funded by Endangered Archival Program at the British Library. Her research interest includes digital libraries, digitization of cultural heritage, visual information, information behavior, and the research methods. She is an author of over 40 peer-reviewed articles, book chapters, and the conference papers. Her book, Digital Libraries, a Research and the Practical, co-authored with Dr. Iris Hugh, was published in 2016. She has been an active member of IFLA Library Theories and Research Standing Committee for 10 years. She served as an LTR chair during 2020 to 2021 and secretary during 2017 to 2019. With this brief introduction, I cordially invite our esteemed keynote speaker, Dr. Christina Matusek, to deliver her keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. Can you hear me okay? All
Yes,
right.
madam.
Great. Dear conference organizers, I would like to extend my sincere thanks for the invitation. I am truly honored to be able to speak at your national conference, and congratulations to the members of Sri Lanka Library Association on your anniversary. I assume it's a wonderful occasion for the library professionals in your country. I chose the topic of sustainability of digital cultural heritage projects to align my talk with the major theme of your conference. And to be honest, it's a topic I really care a lot about because I worked as a digital collections librarian for many years, and this is an area of my research and also teaching. So the topic is also dear to my heart. I will focus on the sustainability of digital objects and systems in cultural heritage organizations. Let me share my slides. So libraries, archives, and museums are increasingly involved in building digital projects and managing materials that are either born digital or digitized from analog sources. And Professor De Silva rightly mentioned that the library landscape is truly different these days. Most of the materials that we use are in digital form. UNESCO defines digital heritage as consisting of unique resources of human knowledge and expression. And they can be of different types and origin, cultural, educational, scientific, administrative, and so on. Sri Lanka National Digital Library and Repository that I'm featuring in this slide is one of the examples of digital libraries that include a wide range of materials. Digital libraries are developed to provide access and to preserve cultural heritage materials of enduring value. As UNESCO states, many of the resources have lasting value and significance, and therefore constitute a heritage that should be protected and preserved for current and future generations. Digital objects represent a fundamental component of digital collections. They are either converted from analog materials through the digitization process or are created in digital form. And in this slide, I include an example from my own practice when I worked as a digital collections librarian at the American Geographical Society Library. And the box featured in this slide includes hand-colored glass lantern slides of photographs that were taken in East Asia in the 1930s. And then when I worked in the library, I actually worked on this project. We digitized the slides, created digital images, digital representation of photographs, plus we created metadata records to describe the objects. And most of the materials that we see in digital libraries are actually created through this digitization process. Only a small portion of the new materials is in digital form, although of course, born digital materials will increase with time. As I mentioned, the glass slides that I featured in the previous slides were original materials were created in 1930s, which makes them more than 80 years old. And they were in very good condition despite their age. I am not sure if the digital images that we created based on those slides will last that long. Our concerns about the sustainability of digital cultural heritage have to do with the fragile and unstable nature of content recorded in digital form. Unlike resources in analog form, printed books or printed photographs, digital objects are not affixed to any permanent medium. The lack of permanence poses risk to their authenticity and integrity. Information unattached to a permanent medium can be easily altered, damaged, or even destroyed. In addition, we have multiple manifestations of the same information object that is encoded in the digital format. So like in digitization, we have master files, we have service masters, we have access files, and I have an example here in this slide of an image that can exist in 4 different formats. So we need to determine how to maintain the relationship between different files and which ones actually will decide to preserve long-term. Technological obsolescence has been recognized as a major risk in preserving digital information. Physical storage media, data formats, hardware, and software all become obsolete over time, posing significant technical challenges to preserving digital objects. Technological progress introduces innovations and improvements in formats and computer platforms, but simultaneously deems older versions obsolete. We need to monitor the evolving technical landscape and migrate digital objects into new formats and systems. There's also an issue of what I call orphaned digital projects, those that have not been maintained. And they may have broken links, outdated design, or outdated information, inaccessible or missing objects. And some of those projects may disappear altogether. Sustainability is an approach to maintaining digital projects over time to avoid the risks of quality decline. Since this is the theme of your conference, I'm sure you will be discussing the concept of sustainability in different contexts. I hope to set the stage by exploring sustainability in the context of digital projects. I selected a few definitions from the research literature. One of the early definitions of digital sustainability comes from a 2007 paper by Kevin Bradley, who points out that digital sustainability encompasses the wide range of issues and concerns that contribute to the longevity of digital information. A more recent definition of organizational sustainability emphasizes, quote, the arrangement of people and work practices to keep digital projects and services going over time, given ongoing challenges. Joanne Newman looks at community archives where sustainability is particularly challenging because those community-based projects often are created through volunteer efforts and may lack institutional affiliation and funding. She combines two concepts: maintaining services at proper level over time and responsibility to do so for future generations. I highlighted some common themes in those definitions. First, that sustainability is not about one issue. It's actually a range of practices and concerns. And second, it focuses on maintaining digital information over time. So not only for current users, but also for future generations. In the traditional view of sustainability, we tend to emphasize the technical aspects of maintaining digital objects and preserving them long-term. Technology is important and cannot be ignored, but sustainability in the digital library environment is a multidimensional concept that requires considering not only the standards and technological infrastructure, but also social issues that are associated with managing and using heritage materials. The multiple dimensions are interdependent and interrelated. Research in the library and information science field outlines several frameworks and models of sustainability. The research team led by Kristen Eschenfender at University of Wisconsin-Madison presents a 9-dimensional framework which focuses on the organizational aspects of sustaining digital projects. Another group of researchers lists 10 basic conditions for sustainable digital artifacts and their ecosystems. So you can see that, discussion of digital sustainability can get rather complex. And obviously in this brief presentation, I'm not able to discuss all the dimensions. So for the purpose of our conversation today, I selected 4 major dimensions that I think are really critical to maintaining digital objects and ensuring their longevity. The technical dimensions includes technology and standards that inform creating and preserving high-quality digital objects. The social dimensions focus on community of users and organizational aspects such as institutional affiliation, funding, long-term preservation plans, and policies. They also have several interdependent and related factors. And next, I will talk about those 4 dimensions in a little bit more detail. We'll start with technical, and technical dimensions include technology and shared knowledge of standards. And those two are really closely related. Technology is a dominant factor, and you can see that I kind of enlarged the technology dimension in this slide seriously really to emphasize that point. But technology systems are not sustainable if they are not based on standards in the digital library field. We can talk about sustainability in digital projects on 2 levels. First, digital objects that we create, and second, systems or infrastructure that allows us to deliver the objects to our users and to preserve those objects long-term. It's important to note that we may not be able to preserve all digital information. And that's why it's important to select items that have scholarly, artistic, or community value, and then create high-quality objects based on the established guidelines, standards and best practices. So for example, the guidelines in digitization include the notion of user-neutral high-resolution master files that are created for long-term preservation, but we also create derivatives sort of for immediate use. The recommendation is to use open, well-established formats such as TIFF for images, PDF for text, or WAV format for audio files. Digital object based on those guidelines will be of high quality and it will last longer. Building sustainable objects and systems is an ongoing process that requires careful planning and considering sustainability at every step of the digital cycle. This slide includes a basic diagram of digitization workflows. At every step of the process, we need to think about standards and sustainability. So in the selection process, I mentioned that we have to select items that are of value to community, whether it's a scholarly community or, or other types of communities. Standards are very important during image capture and optimization. We also want to use systems that are sustainable. So we need digital asset management system or content management systems to deliver digital objects to our users. And it's important to select the systems that are not only well designed from the usability point of view, but also that those that are compatible with the metadata and interoperability standards. We also need digital preservation solution to preserve master files long-term. And many trusted digital repositories and preservation solutions are based on the international standard, the Open Archival Information Systems Framework and other preservation standards. Many of the standards used in the digital library field are international, which contributes to interoperability and allows us to share the materials worldwide. When I was exploring the Sri Lanka National Digital Library, when I was preparing for this talk, I noticed that the library uses a standard Dublin core metadata schema and PDF as a format for books, digitized books and manuscripts. And these are the same standards that I use in my practice as a librarian, and these are the standards that I teach in my classes to the library and information science students. The use of open international standards contributes to sustainability, and it's easier to sustain projects that are built on shared open standards. So I will move to the social dimensions and start with the organizational. The social dimensions include organization and users. Organizational dimension involves multiple factors that contribute to the creation and long-term maintenance of digital objects and systems. Institutional affiliation is important because it's easier to maintain projects that are affiliated with a well-established and funded organization. I mentioned the growth of community-based projects, and there is a lot of interest in the United States in community archives these days. And those represent wonderful volunteer grassroots efforts, but honestly, they are really challenging to sustain because of the lack of that institutional affiliation. Even when a project is undertaken by a well-established archive or library with a regular budget, it's critical to integrate digital projects into the fabric of organization services. Many early digital projects were undertaken with grant funding. And once grants ended and there was no regular financial support for those projects, it was very difficult to continue. And sometimes that led to orphaned and abandoned projects that I mentioned before. Digital projects will be sustainable if they are aligned with the organization mission, have regular budget and funding from predictable and diverse streams of allocation. We did talk about the importance of standards. So of course, the organizations have to have staff knowledgeable of digital library standards and technologies. However, we cannot be experts in everything. So collaboration with other cultural heritage organizations is a positive factor in sustainability because we can share resources, we can share platforms, and we can also share knowledge. Sustainability and digital preservation are intertwined. And sometimes people use those interchangeably, but in my opinion, sustainability is a broader concept, but obviously digital preservation is important. Developing an institutional approach to digital preservation is a critical factor. This may include establishing a policy of institutional commitment to the long-term maintenance of digital objects, preparing plans for long-term preservation, determining the levels of preservation, establishing a policy for data transfer, refreshment, migration, building a dedicated preservation repository, or selecting a preservation service. I think you can see here how the organizational dimension is closely related to technology. And finally, I would like to talk about user-centered approach as an important dimension of sustainability. And we typically don't talk about users when we discuss sustainability. But as the quote from Kevin Bradley indicates, a collection of digital information is not sustainable if it has too few contributors or insufficient users to justify its existence. So we can focus digital projects around our users first by studying their needs in the planning phase, and then evaluating projects by gathering data from users and using that feedback to improve the collections. We should also go just beyond, building collections and that static model of delivery, and then build a participatory culture by considering barriers to use. And those can be in the design, such as poor navigation of collections or other usability issues, or in metadata. For example, the lack of clear copyright statements may be a barrier to use. Furthermore, we should encourage user engagement and contributions, either in the form of comments or tags, which improve resource descriptions, or allowing users to submit their own resources. And then participation in social media is important because it allows us to reach out maybe to users who typically don't come to national digital libraries or academic libraries that host those collections, and promoting collections on social media may increase visibility of those projects. Fostering digital sustainability is important to all cultural heritage organizations, but it's particularly critical for community archives. Community-based projects may lack resources to support standard-based development or a robust technical infrastructure. But on the other hand, they have a strong user engagement. And this example is actually a recent project that I am working on with a group of students in my library information science program. We are working with a community archive in a remote mountain region of Colorado. And this is an organization that actually has very limited funding, but through a collaboration with our program, they were able to build a digital archive that we hope is going to be sustainable and is going to be around for a long time. I want to conclude by restating that multiple factors play a role in sustaining digital cultural heritage projects, and that in turn contributes to sustainable community development. Sustainable digital projects and systems contribute to sustainable community development. And we often talk about sustainability in the context of environment. So I want to point out the difference between digital objects and natural resources. Digital cultural objects are different. We need to create them, and obviously we need some resources to create them. But once they are created and available in digital libraries, use of digital resources does not diminish their value and does not damage the environment. And the value to society increases with wider access and use. So that's why I want to encourage you to explore digital collections that are openly available. The image in this slide comes from the collections of the American Geographical Society Library that I had a privilege to work when I worked as a librarian many years ago. And this photograph it's a set of photographs of Sri Lanka from the 1960s, and the pictures were taken by an American photojournalist, Harrison Foreman. And these are historical photographs at this point, and hopefully the audience would be interested in exploring it. And if you want to study sustainability a little bit more, here's the list of references that I used in my presentation. And I want to thank you very much for your attention. Have a wonderful conference. Thank you very much.
We are really glad to have you, Dr. Christina, as a keynote speaker to our national conference. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and dedicating your precious time to us. Please accept this token of appreciation from the National Conference on Library and Information Science 2021, organized by the Sri Lanka Library Association.
Thank you.
We at Sri Lanka Library Association worked collaboratively to make wonderful memories as determinations and commitment made progress.
Of course, this is the fruitful outcome of the conference. The screen is ready to launching the e-proceedings of the National Conference on Library and Information Science 2020.
You all are warmly welcome to access the e-proceeding of the conference via www.slla.lk.
Well, Asri, here we are at the end of the yet another iconic national conference on libraries, science ceremony in Sri Lanka Library Association. Ladies and gentlemen, the official event, which is now concluding to close to just 1 hour. However, a set of members spent numerous hours planning, organizing, rehearsing, and conducting all activities leading up to this moment. To deliver the vote of thanks, let me invite the Dr. M.M. Mashrufa, Conference Secretary, National Conference on Library and Information Science 2021. The screen is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have the honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks as the Secretary of the National Conference of Library and Information Science 2021 of Sri Lanka Library Association. First and foremost, I wish to express my sincere gratitude to the Chief Guest, Professor Nilanthi D. Silva, Vice Chancellor, University of Kelaniya. Thank you very much, Madam, for accepting our invitation and gracing this occasion and sharing your expertise among the participants. Thank you. I also would like to convey my heartiest gratitude to Dr. Christina K. Matushek, Associate Professor, University of Denver, USA, for your presence here as a keynote speaker. Madam, your keynote has inspired and enriched all the participants with good practices and new knowledge on the theme. My hearty thanks go to distinguished invitees, Mr. W. Sunil, Director General, National Library and Documentation Services Board, Dr. Mrs. Namali Suravira, Head, Department of Library and Information Science, University of Kelaniya, Dr. Chammika Mallavarachi, President, University Librarians Association of Sri Lanka, and the chairpersons, Mrs. Padma Bandarnayaka, Director, National Library and Documentation Services Board, Dr. T. Prathipan, Senior Assistant Librarian, Uvawellassa University of Sri Lanka, and Mr. S. Santharuban, Senior Assistant Librarian, Eastern University, Sri Lanka, for being enlightened the inaugural session with your presence. This conference has become a true amidst of this challenging situation due to the coordination and the proper guidance of Dr. Rohan Gamage, the President of Sri Lanka Library Association. His friendly liaisons maintained with the conference organizing committee is commendable. Thank you very much for your exemplary leadership in successfully organizing this event. At this juncture, I should remind and thank Dr. Mrs. K.R.N. Harshani, General Secretary, and all the council members of Sri Lanka Library Association for their continuous support and motivation to conduct this program successfully. I should thank our sponsor, Read Plus Foundation, and our program compeers, Mrs. Nadika Sanjeevani Ratnabahu, Mr. Astri Vijayasekara, all paper presenters, co-authors, and participants. I also express my hearty appreciations and thanks to the reviewers and editorial committee members for bringing a fine product, which is a beautiful and scholarly proceeding to a higher standard. Finally, I would like to thank to the efforts and hard works made by the NACLIS committee, especially the passion of the conference chair, Dr. Tharanga Ranasinghe, as a team leader. I should highlight here that conducting this conference to this grand manner is not a simple thing due to the challenges caused by this pandemic. Continuous lockdown, yes, really during the peak time of wave 4 in Sri Lanka. The conference chair and the committee has shown their spirit of teamwork, which I should highly appreciate and honored. Thank you very much, dear Dr. Tharanga Ranasinghe and all the conference committee members for all of your support to conduct this conference successfully. At last, but not least, I thank the event organizers, International Institute for Knowledge Management, for their technical support. Once again, I thank you all. Stay safe and be healthy.
Thank you, Dr. Mashrufa, for your vote of thanks. Before adjourning the ceremony, ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the national anthem.
Namo, 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 namo. සැප සිරි සෙත සදනා ජීවනයේ මාතා පිළිගනු මැන අප භක්ති පූජා නමෝ නමෝ මාතා අප ශ්‍රී ලංකා නමෝ 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 මාතා ඔබ වේ අප විද්‍යා ඔබමය අප සත්‍යා ඔබ වේ අප ශක්තිය අප හද තුල භක්ති ඔබ අප ආලෝකේ අපගේ අනුප්‍රාණී ඔබ අප ජීවන වේ අප මුක්තිය ඔබගේ නව ජීවන ගෙමිනේ පිටින අප පුබුදු කරන් මාතා ඥාන වීර වඩවමින රැගෙන යනු මැන ජය භූමි කරා එක මවකගේ දරු කැලබැලිනා යමු යමු වී නොපමා ප්‍රේම වඩා සමගේද දුරනදා නමෝ නමෝ මාතා අප ශ්‍රී ලංකා නමෝ 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 මාතා අප ශ්‍රී ලංකා නමෝ 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 මාතා
Thank you. Knowledge is power. This power really transferring to the public through the libraries. That is why libraries are taking as a power of knowledge of excellence. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that all of you are waiting to start our technical session of this conference. Please join with us technical session at 10:50 a.m. with the link that you have received. With that, we are adjourning the inaugural session of National Conference on Library and Information Science, NACLIS 2021. Let's moving towards sustainability through library transformation. Thank you very much.